want to get back to the election campaign now because national security and defence is front and centre of this campaign, as well as cost of living. Whoever becomes the Prime Minister this weekend, well, they're going to have quite the in-tray on Monday morning. So what is the list they're going to have to walk through? Joining me now is former Home Affairs Secretary Mike Pezzello. Mike, thanks for your time. What's the number one issue that the Prime Minister will have to deal with on Monday morning?
Well, good morning, Laura. In the field of defence, security and international affairs, I have a list and I'll quickly go through the list. This is what I think is in the in-tray. I think an immediate action needs to be taken on increasing defence spending. I think, as we talked about in recent shows, a combination of where the coalition wants to go with its funding profile, building on the very good national defence strategy that Mr Miles introduced a year and so ago. Combining those two things, absolutely imperative, because otherwise what will happen is that the additional funding that the government has put into defence will all be cannibalised and soaked up by the submarines and the frigates. So that's issue number one. I think issue number two is cutting a security deal with President Trump. They're putting 4 combat submarines into Stirling near Perth from 2027. We should take on so that we get the benefit ourselves of learning how to maintain and cycle those submarines through maintenance so they can be more effective in their operations. We should take over the full cycle docking of those submarines and quickly build the infrastructure required at Henderson. And there's lots of other things we need to do in relation to what I call a new security deal with President Trump within the auspices of our alliance. So maybe we can talk a bit more about that. I think we need to strengthen a number of alliances in Asia and actually create alliances in Asia where we engage in mutual protection and mutual support with one another, including making military equipment, but also being prepared to go to each other's assistance in the case of cyber attacks or indeed military attacks. Japan, India, Korea, Indonesia, the Philippines for starters. I think we need to build on the excellent work that Treasury's been doing recently on economic security. How do we harden our economy to ensure that we've got more resilient supply chains, we've got bigger stockpiles, we can make more things here, and we can rapidly repurpose civilian industrial infrastructure over to defence production in an emergency. And finally, in Home Affairs, whether it's Mr Burke on Monday morning or Senator Patterson that you just had on the show, I think whilst the focus in Home Affairs in recent years has been on immigration, I think there needs to be a significant pivot to civil defence, societal resilience, so that should, God forbid, a conflict come, we're actually better prepared and much more prepared than we were, say, ahead of the pandemic. Those are my 5 top issues in the PM's in-tray.
In terms of a new security deal with Trump, what do you mean by that? Because obviously the AUKUS deal is a big deal. That's with the UK. Would it be an addition to that, obviously, or would it be a special deal that is required, do you think, between the United States and Australia?
It would build on the initiatives that have been in train for almost over a decade when Prime Minister Gillard and President Obama agreed to the forced posture initiatives. They were largely basing agreements. They were about new tarmacs, fuel farms, infrastructure of that nature. What the Americans really want from us, and this is something that they want from us, is to be able to better protect themselves by protecting the southern flank. So when they look across the Pacific, they've got a Pacific Ocean which protects them, but they need to have forces in the north, up around Alaska and the Aleutian Islands, in the centre, around Guam, and then in the south. Guess where that is? Australia. So we're almost their forward post to protect them in terms of any adversaries coming across the Pacific. What we should do is transition our focus on forced posture, which has really been about basing and infrastructure and property deals, over to setting up a coalition warfighting alliance if it came to, God forbid, a conflict, so that we say, right, you've got your submarines in Perth, we actually want to maintain them because we want to learn how to maintain them. And then, oh, by the way, because we're doing that, when the first Virginia comes off the production line that we've purchased, we will get it. And we just should be quite emphatic, quite transactional and sharp-edged about that deal. Can I just emphasise this point, Laura, because it's been missed in all of the commentary. The Americans are not putting 4 Virginia and similar submarines into Stirling just to train the Royal Australian Navy. 4 submarines is 10% of their global combat force. There is no way they're putting that amount of their capability down in Perth just to do us a favour. It is a combat force to protect America.
OK, that is a really good point to be highlighted as well. We know that Donald Trump has made a lot about what individual countries spend on defence. We know that they've been pretty frustrated with Europe and NATO in particular when it comes to conflicts in that part of the world. During this election campaign, there's been a lot of focus on defence spending as a percentage of GDP. Do you think that that's the measure? Not just for Donald Trump, but should that be the measure, a percentage of our GDP, or do we need to look at it in a different way?
Look, I think we should look at it in a different way. I think the headline of a percentage of GDP is good for retail communication, because you say the percentage is either 2% or 3%, you can calculate that number and then you can say it's X number of billions of dollars. So currently for Australia, it's about 2% of GDP. That's about 60 billion. So for retail communication, which is not unimportant, that's a useful proxy to at least give you a comparison. And I spent a number of years in the Defence Department as the lead defence planner. For technicians and for technocrats in this area, that's really not a sensible way to go about it when you actually are building the detail of what you're going to do with your force. You need to build from the ground up. What's my strategy? What are the current capabilities that I have? What are the gaps in those capabilities? And what's my future force? And then you build up the capabilities, whether they're submarines, surface warships, mine countermeasures, vessels, missile interceptors. And then as the financial bill, if you like, adds up, then you can translate that into what is that as a percentage of GDP. But you've really got to build it as a ground-up number. And if I can just emphasise this point, Laura, I absolutely agree. I think the Prime Minister said this a couple of times during the campaign. I think Mr Dutton said it, so I think they're both on the same page. We should determine that number. That is our number to determine, and we should do it as an Australian sovereign decision, which then might well be, if you like, agreeable to the Americans because it happens to be a number that they want us to spend. But we should do it for our own reasons and based on our own logic and calculations.
Mike Pezzello, it's always good to talk to you. We'll be having a very interesting conversation next week, I think, probably along the same lines, because it's not going to matter who the government, who the Prime Minister is next week. We'll see you soon. Appreciate your time.